Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, where every week we hear an amazing story from a serious founder who built a valuable software company and did it without big funding. I'm your host, Greg Head, and this week my guest is Henry Valentino, the founder and CEO and president of EConnect. EConnect is software for casinos and stadium and big venues to do facial recognition for safety and security purposes at the front door, to keep track of everybody who's coming in the building and identify the ones you don't want in your building or your venue. It's safety, and it's a fast-growing software business that's bootstrapped. It's one of those overnight successes that took over 15 years to get going. And there was a big COVID pivot in there. So to really focus on this part of the business, they're growing fast and profitable, and it's an exciting business in the gaming and venue space. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics here: the regulations, the privacy, the technology, selling in this very interesting vertical market. And Henry is a very experienced entrepreneur. I know you'll love the story. Hey, Henry, welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast.
Greg, good morning. How you doing today?
Good morning. It's morning here in Dallas, and you're in Vegas, where it's even more morning, pretty early over there. How are things in Vegas? The start of
It's
summer.
that time
Yeah.
of year where it starts to get sweltering. Gets a little hot here in Vegas,
Yes, I
which is
get it.
great. Everybody heads inside to the casinos, and they have the biggest air conditioners in the world.
That's really amazing. Yes, quite a thing Vegas is these days. How is Vegas doing after COVID? I know it was kind of shut down for a while and then came
It
back. Is
kind
it the
of
same as before?
well, it raced back. Then it had a little bit of excitement with the Super Bowl.
Ah,
Um, I'd say it's a little bit down. They say 3%. That's not too bad. Still getting about
okay.
42 million visitors a year through the
Wow.
airport.
Awesome. Well, you've been in Vegas for a while. You're a longtime entrepreneur, and we'll talk about your journey. But your overnight success, almost 20 years with eConnect. Why don't you tell the audience here what is eConnect these days, and then we'll talk about what's going on in the business and what's happening.
Absolutely, absolutely. So eConnect is a software as a service business, focusing primarily on casinos and stadiums,
Yeah.
providing facial recognition technology, AI technology, what we call identity management technology.
Right. And what is the use case there that it's being used by casinos that
Well,
people can understand?
there's a number of interesting use cases. The big one today is keeping the bad guys out. There are a lot of people who get kicked out of casinos and they keep coming back. The
Yeah.
penalty is very little. So, using facial recognition to put them on the list, they could also be a self excluded person. Maybe they don't want to be gambling anymore and they ask to be excluded.
Oh,
And that's
interesting.
another
Please help me.
application
Yeah.
that's big.
Yes.
Human
Well,
trafficking, we're always on the lookout for gangs and associations that are doing human trafficking and drug sales at these properties, and so that's another big application.
so is the simple version that you serve the big casinos, they have cameras everywhere, and your software literally identifies everybody and points out the bad guys and the questionable people right away.
That's the simple version, yeah, it's primarily at the entrances because if you can get somebody before they get in, then you don't have to worry as much inside the property.
Right.
So, a lot of them have been equipped now with metal detectors. We've integrated with, firearms and weapons detection systems, and so when they come in, they really get a good feeling, they're known, a lot of them use ID scanners, and we're helping facilitate that.
Wow. Okay. So this is in kind of, I don't know if it's a controversial area, but it's an area that people don't really think about. If you spend any time in the UK, there's cameras everywhere in London, remnants of their, terrorist prevention days where they made a, made a decision as a government in a country to have more surveillance, to have more safety. And we'll talk about the whole privacy, safety, decision making process with these modern AI facial recognition tools there. So that's EConnect. Do you only serve casinos? I guess you said stadiums as well. Is that a new thing or
Well, we've been doing stadiums for a couple of years, but they have a similar problem. People come in all at once in the stadiums, and again, you don't want people that are not supposed to be there. And so that's essentially the application. Very
okay?
quickly, everyone is kind of used to going through a weapons detection system at most stadiums. If you have the modern ones, you don't have to be wanded down like they do.
Yeah.
And then with the facial recognition, if you're on the ban list, you're not getting in.
Well, this is a modern thing here, and I can imagine even tons of use cases out of that. But you're pretty focused on the casino business, being in Vegas, and I know it's not just Vegas casinos there. How big is eConnect right now? What can you say about employees and
Sure.
customers and
So,
revenues?
Greg, we've got more than 30 employees. We support customers worldwide: Australia, the Philippines, Canada, and of course, the US. And we're approaching 10 million in ARR.
Awesome. And growing and profitable. What can you generally say about that?
Growing, absolutely. Profitable in my way of keeping track of the money. And I
Yeah.
say that as a founder who's been at it for a long time. What people don't realize, there's a lot of different ways to account for recurring revenue businesses.
Yeah.
I am still an old school guy, Greg. I measure how much money comes in and gets deposited in the bank, and then I have a pretty solid idea of what the costs are every month because it's mostly human resources. It's mostly the cost of our team,
Hmm.
and so I can make sure that we don't hire more people than we have money coming in for.
Yeah.
Now, one thing about recurring revenue businesses is you tend to amortize that over the term of the agreement,
Yes.
if you
Yes.
will,
To do your
right?
revenue recognition monthly versus when you sell an annual contract, for example.
That's exactly right. In our world, we support only enterprise customers. They pay us at least once a year. Sometimes it's once every 3 years. And then they don't have to worry about being nickel and dimed for support. We take care of everything they need.
Yeah. And in your business model, there's a long history of surveillance cameras and service providers that watch the cameras and people in front of screens, the old days, all that hardware, software and services there. But are you in any hardware and do you have any people that watch these screens or is that all automated?
Well, you
Good
got two
question.
good questions
Yeah.
there.
Mhm.
The old eye in the sky was literally some guy standing on a catwalk looking over the table
Right.
trying to
Yeah.
keep an
Hmm.
eye on
Yeah.
what was
Pacing
going
around.
on
Right.
there.
Mhm.
They've moved quite a bit since then, but I'm old enough to remember when I got here to Las Vegas, they were still recording using tape, using
Yeah.
VHS tape. Now everything is totally digital in terms of the recording.
Yep.
Obviously, that makes it very easy to find a particular moment in time. But what eConnect has done is we marry the data so that you could search by the data event. Let's say you want to see, did that bartender really give them the Dom Perignon champagne that they
Mm.
rang up? Well, you could go right to that moment in time. You could see maybe 3 or 4 cameras that have a view of that transaction,
Mhm.
and you could validate right on the spot, did he get what he ordered? And so that's kind of the history of eConnect.
Yeah, and so but you don't have people that do the escalation of here's a bad guy, that's automated and immediate and, software
The
driven these days.
You know what? It is all software driven, but there is typically a team of people at the property
Yes,
who
of course.
decide who is on the list.
Yeah.
And that, you got a little bit of power there, Greg.
Yeah.
I could tell you a quick story about a guy who didn't know that his wife was going to be leaving him, and he got mad, and he put his wife and her new boyfriend on the 86 list, and as soon as they showed up at the property, so did the police.
Oh.
So you
Yeah,
really
yeah.
gotta think about who has the authority to create those lists.
Right. And so, each casino, and they're probably not sharing any data at all about between themselves. Maybe they are, but they come up with their own list of who's on the bad guy list and have images of them that are matching, that kind of thing.
That's exactly right,
Okay.
prior to EConnect, they would email those images around. Now they can subscribe to a shared database,
Okay.
maybe
Well,
per region,
yeah.
and they can decide what they're gonna share if they feel it's particularly, egregious.
Yep.
FBI list is also something
Okay.
that is publicly available, and then you see down at the municipality level, sometimes there's BOLOs and maybe, missing person, lists
What is
that get
Bolo?
shared. Be on the lookout. Be on
Okay.
the lookout for
Yeah.
somebody. The
So
police
do
may
you
not
actually manage those common lists and the APIs to the FBI most wanted and all of that?
certain aspects of it we do.
Okay.
The customer determines who is gonna be on their list
Right.
and how they're going to treat somebody who gets an alert.
Okay. And so how long has this business been going?
eConnect has been in business since 2009.
Okay. And have you always been in this surveillance business, or was this a new thing for the new technology?
When we first started, like a lot of businesses, we weren't 100% sure, and, we
Well,
had
look
to
at you.
treat
You're an experienced entrepreneur. You actually knew that you weren't 100% sure. Like,
well, we
we can
thought
all
we
look
were
back
sure
and
at the
say, I
time,
wasn't
Greg.
sure. But yeah.
Now we were sure at the time.
Okay. There we go.
Just
There you go.
looking back now, we really
All right.
didn't know because look, everyone knows you need product market fit to be successful, right?
Yeah.
You need a certain level of that to even keep going, especially if you're running a business that doesn't have outside capital. The only way you make payroll is because customers are generous enough to give you their money.
Right.
And
So,
so
and you don't have any outside funding, equity funding?
we do not have any outside venture capital or private equity or outside investors. We took a venture debt round
Oh, okay.
right before COVID, and we used a company out of Sand Hill Road there, Costella Kirsch.
How
That
much did
ended
you
up
raise in debt there? We'll talk about that. That's an interesting
Yeah, it was about $2
non-dilutive.
million all
Okay.
told, and we were trying to get the bank, to do it, but,
No.
the bank wasn't
Oh,
super,
thanks.
familiar with recurring revenue contracts. They basically instead of thinking of it as an asset, they think of it as a liability because now you have to provide your software for 12 more or 11 more months if you took a year's payment up front. So
Yeah.
they're really in their traditional banking, they're just not willing to lend against it.
Yeah. Well, that's the difference between traditional banking and the modern, let's say, financial software as a service, turning into AI, but the asset that's your low churn subscription revenue is very valuable. I imagine with your kind of company, I'm sure it's pretty sticky and low churn, but I'm sure you're getting constant emails for people who want to invest or require and all that kind of thing. Is that pretty regular for you?
That is a fair statement.
They see the
Obviously
value, the banks don't in the same way. Yeah.
right, we have very low churn. The only people that do leave us typically are going out of business, which is
Yeah.
very infrequent in the casino world. You really gotta be a poor operator if you can't make money running a casino, but there
Well, we'll
are a
talk about
few.
the casino game because it's a very different world than
Yes.
selling to healthcare or selling to any other vertical
Yes,
out
yes,
there. I mean, you're
yes.
selling to tribal nations here in the US and Canada, and, I'm sure there's you know, all kinds of influences in a casino that are not normal in regular businesses. Well, congratulations, Henry. You've found a strong niche, and you're doing well there and, selling to big enterprise, customers after all your adventures, and you've built a valuable software company, and you did it without big funding, and you're still going after all
Thank you,
these
Greg.
years. Let's talk about your journey here. You're an older entrepreneur. What did you do through the years? I mean, were you an engineer somewhere and then finally set on your own, or have
I've
you always been
always
an entrepreneur?
I've always been interested in sales.
Okay.
And
Oh, there you
so,
go.
I think anybody starting a business that doesn't have an interest in sales better consider something else
Yeah.
because everybody is selling something,
Yeah.
right? And so, I was lucky enough at an early age uh, to sell a few businesses that we started, mostly
Ooh.
around telecommunications and the internet.
Yep.
Back in the late 80s and early 90s, the
Wow.
internet was exploding. And if
Yeah.
you had a level of competency, actually, one of the reasons I ended up in Nevada
Mm.
was that Virginia had a very aggressive capital gains and personal income tax on top of your federal tax. And as I was preparing to sell the business, I met a tax lawyer who advised me that I could get a free house by living in Nevada when I completed that transaction.
Yeah.
And a lot of times
What were your
entrepreneurs,
capital gains,
right? I mean,
and
it's
your
big
state
money.
income tax? Right.
Greg, it's big, big money. And a lot of times young entrepreneurs don't realize how much that ends up being when you're thinking, hey, somebody's going to buy me for $10 million, and at the end of the day, I got 350,000. What the
Yeah,
heck
right.
happened, you know?
Right. I
And
get it.
so that was one of the things that moved me to Las Vegas and also helped me better understand how to appreciate capital versus, run a cash flow positive
Right.
business.
So you kinda created, let's say, these small businesses that became valuable, became a capital asset. You sold one, moved to Vegas to minimize your taxes, and you said, "Oh, I get it now. It's about profits and the asset value."
That's
Probably.
exactly right.
Because
And that
you're a bootstrap founder. You didn't say, "I need to get funding and let's go, bet it all on big equity."
uh, I will confess to having done an angel
Oh,
round,
there you go.
and I was essentially it ended up being a hostile takeover.
Hmm.
The angels were not angels.
Of one of your previous ventures or of
That's
EConnect?
right, of one of my
Okay.
previous
Yeah.
ventures. And so, you get those experiences when you're young and you're strong and you can figure out a way around it. What I would tell people is look, oftentimes founders and equity investors don't have the same objectives or
Alignment.
timelines.
Yes. Yeah. Mhm.
And, if you get involved with an equity investor and you think you're gonna pay yourself 500,000 a year, even if the business can afford it, you're not gonna do it.
Yeah.
But if you are the sole decider, I'm not saying I'm paying myself that, I
Yeah.
would like to, but you make the decisions about what you're gonna do,
Right.
So it's a nuanced difference.
Well, it's pretty clear out there, and I generally put angel funding in the practical funding zone. They generally don't own you, and it's kind of more of a donation. Here you go, kid. Good luck. Let me know if it does it. But if you go back a ways, the '90s and 2000s, a lot of angels were kind of predatory, and they weren't so nice about it. The modern angels are just trying to place of bets and shoot the moon. But yes, you ran into one of those. A little bit like the friendly folks that funded the casinos in the beginning, right? They weren't
That's
there
right.
for, it wasn't a bank, you
That's
know.
right. That's
That's
right. In the case of the angels too, another thing I would caution other entrepreneurs about. Um, I ended up taking investments as small as 25,000,
sure.
and the guy who put in 25,000 felt like he should be the decider on the board as much as the
What
founder who
what
had
year was
put.
that, Henry?
That
Roughly.
was back in the let's see,
Yes.
2003,
Yeah.
2002,
I think
2004
we're
timeframe.
mostly past that these days because it's kind of more common these days to do angel investing, and there's a lot less begging involved in the modern era. But yes, people should be looking out for that. And I warn people against the built-in perils of big VC funding. I've played that game and I've won that game, but I've also lost it. But unless you really create a very valuable company in a real hurry and exit it, it's pretty treacherous for most founders out there. So just beware what you're doing out there. So, what other businesses have you been in? Are they all tech businesses and things like that?
Greg, I started working for my mom in the
Yeah.
bridal and formal wear business, selling tuxedos and bridal gowns on a retail sales floor.
Oh, that's
Uh,
sales right there.
that'll teach you how to sell.
Oh my
Try to
goodness.
sell the mother of the bride anything,
Yeah.
and you really get your skills sharpened up. I wish I had been as experienced then as I am now,
Mhm.
because, man, looking back, retail, I understand why we struggled. It was a very difficult
Yeah.
business, very hard to make money. And the landlord essentially just cut the rug out from under us by allowing a tenant to come in literally right across the way from us in the mall. And 40% of the business went away pretty
Yeah.
much as soon as they opened. So it was
Well,
a
those are
hard
some
lesson,
small
but
business lessons there. What was EConnect for the first, years before you discovered this casino bad guy surveillance, facial
so we
recognition problem?
we tried to do, Vegas is a place that attracts a lot of attention. And so we had a broadcast business where we were thinking that those webcams could generate some kind of revenue, and we actually would do pay-per-view at the wedding chapels, uh, so people who couldn't come to
There's
Las
a
Vegas.
practical founder,
Right, right.
software story, right? People thinking about all this AI stuff and, pay-per-view at wedding chapels, also
Yep,
a good business. That's pretty fun. Yeah,
exactly, exactly.
yeah. And then how did you get into this business here? So, because there really wasn't APIs for this facial recognition and this kind of technology. And I don't know, would you call it this facial recognition? Is that AI? Is that an LLM like we would
It
see it
is, it's
today?
a very
Okay.
specific one, it's focused to do just a certain thing, but it was COVID that triggered it, Greg.
Okay.
We were basically heavily in the hospitality business, and every hospitality operator was closed down,
Yeah.
and you may recall that even when they started to allow people to open, it was still too risky to let them have a drink or go to the restaurant. So, the casinos were being limited in their capacity and also in their offerings. And so they turned to us because we've been in 300 casinos for many, many years.
Mhm.
And they said, can you help us with this? We created a device that could check the temperature
Oh,
and
sure.
could
Yeah.
capture the face and give them a quick authorization to get in. And that was the first time I
There's a
realized
lot of
that
software startups that did that first, 3 months.
yeah, you had to do something, and these guys wanted to get open, and we were shocked at how quick and accurate the face matching ended up being.
Oh,
That's what got us thinking, "Hey, does anyone have a database of faces? Any of the casinos, can they look up somebody by face if they're
right.
not giving you the ID?" And the reality is even now they don't. And so that's what we're helping them build. They have a database of loyalty players. They know those loyalty players as long as they give them the card. But if they don't use the card, then they're unknown.
Yeah. Or all the big spenders that are not on the loyalty card and everything else. So how did that go from temperature checking during COVID to facial recognition? Did one customer, casino say, you work with one and you kind of pivoted and made that turn? It's a very common story out there. It's not generally what we hear in hindsight, but you survived long enough, like 11 years doing stuff before this opportunity opened up, presented itself like almost on a platter for you. But how did it turn into your first 10 customers with the facial recognition problem?
You know, we were at about 4 million in ARR when COVID hit with very, very low cancellation
Yeah.
and 35% canceled right away. They were
Right.
not open.
Ouch.
So
Yeah.
we had to figure out something to help them get back open,
Yeah.
and it was, just being resourceful, and trying to
And
keep
you
the
were in
team.
conversation with these casinos saying, "If I built this, would you pay for this? Is this useful?" You kinda drag this solution that you could see over the line, Mr. Sales Guy, right?
That's right, but also
Okay.
the regulator was saying, "You have to do this. You have to do this
Oh.
at the entrance. If you don't do that, we're not gonna let you open."
And for the temperature checking.
temperature check, capacity limits,
Okay.
queues and
Oh,
IDs. And so that's when we came up with the idea of the VIP line. Like, you're coming here every day. We don't need to see your ID. We just need to validate that it's you.
yeah.
And so you can go in a lot
Oh,
faster.
I see. Just like we do in the airports now, we just do a facial scan and,
Yep.
check, you're in. Okay. Interesting. I mean, do you feel like you were, I don't know, you had this small business in software for all this time and that you had let's say, a forced COVID pivot. And is it a new kind of venture now? Are you on a new trajectory, to grow this up? Or is it,
Yes.
just another lily pad that you moved to, hop
You
to?
know what? Everyone always looks for that product market fit. What I'd say is our identity management piece of the business is growing at greater than 50%.
Yeah.
And so that's super exciting because prior to that, our growth rate was around 15 to 20%.
Yeah. Well, okay. And is this a SaaS business? Is this a hosted business with, your own AI technology? Or how is this delivered to these casinos now?
Yeah, great question. It is SaaS in several senses, but I would say not what Silicon Valley really defines a SaaS business as. So in an ideal SaaS business, you want to have a multi-tenant
Hmm.
software platform, that tech stack that allows you to support, hundreds, thousands of
Yeah.
customers on a
Yeah.
basically AWS setup.
Yeah.
In the casino world, especially, they're heavily, heavily regulated. I'm not saying they are smartly regulated, but they're forced to do premise-based systems. And
So
so
you have, I mean, is it Windows software or is it,
it's
is it
still, we still deploy Linux, but we will help them either spin up a VM on their premise or
okay. Yeah.
deploy a server or two,
Yeah.
depending on
Interesting.
what their capacity is, how
And
many
you sell
entrances.
it as a subscription contract,
Yes, yes.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, they
And
might
does
pay
it
upfront for the hardware at one time, maybe upfront for the services as well, and then pay the subscription bundled in.
Well, everybody in the surveillance business in the old days used to be integrators. We'll buy the cameras, we'll install the cameras, we'll do the software, we'll do the watching and all of that. But are you in the hardware business? Is that material to you? Most people just want to pass that through and say, "Go get the cameras, and that we'll power them."
No, we're not in that business,
Yeah, great.
and we're trying to be partners with the guys who want that
God.
business, because facial recognition ends up requiring a bunch of new cameras that they didn't
Uh,
have. Even a lot of times people
oh,
will say, "Oh, I'll use your existing cameras." Well, the casino cameras, like I said, eye in the sky, it's up above, so it's not getting a great face shot when it's down, pointing down. If you have a baseball cap on or you're looking at your phone, not getting a great face shot. So there is a lot of work for the integrators, Greg, and we
yeah.
try to partner with them.
Yep.
The customer says, "Hey, I want to do this. I've got 11 entrances." You got to scope out how many cameras they might have that work. If you're willing, cameras are relatively inexpensive nowadays. It's the
Yes.
physical work to get them installed that really is costing.
So you're profitable and this side of your business is growing. How do you sell to casinos? Are you the chief sales guy, chief sales officer? Do you have a salesperson or two that knocks on these doors or networks or goes to the whatever casino trade shows? How do you guys
You
reach
know,
these new customers?
we have an excellent team. I'd say one of the reasons I'm still doing it and we haven't, sold out to a strategic or a private equity is I have a great time. I enjoy all the people that I
There you
work
go.
with. A bunch of the people that started the company with me are still with me
Oh,
today,
great.
and we've been great friends as well as colleagues.
It's a
And
team.
so, we work together, but we have an outstanding sales team.
Oh, great.
When you're selling something that has true product market fit, Greg, it doesn't take the founder to be the only guy to do it
Great.
because the prospects are buying it whether you show up or not.
Okay, so let's talk about your version of product market fit from all your entrepreneurial experiences and bootstrapping and so forth. It's easy to fake product market fit in your investor slides and so forth, but you can't fake it when you're running a long-term business without outside capital. What is your definition of product market fit? That's sufficient to make these things make your product and business go.
Well, the first thing I look for is, are my customers, we're fortunate enough to have quite a few customers, are they buying?
Yeah.
Do they only buy from me or only buy from a competitor? Or is the market rich enough that there's multiple competitors? And
Right.
if you don't see any competitors, guess what? You really don't have true product market fit. And for years, eConnect would compete only against the guys that sold the camera systems
Yeah.
because they could bundle the data integration in for free. They were in
Oh,
the
I see.
hardware
Yeah.
business.
Uh-huh.
So we were charging $250,000 a year for something that they would throw in when they get a
Mm.
5 or $6 million sale. So it was very challenging. We were providing something that gave them an ROI, and that's why they rarely canceled, and that's why they were willing to pay a little more than getting the free system. But the difference today is everyone can recognize that your security guard can't possibly remember as many faces as the system, right? It's like, when we first went to digital video, if you were putting tapes in, and you'd be shocked to know that some of the finest properties here in Las Vegas were the last guys to pony up the money to
It's a big
go
one. Yeah.
digital. So they were buying VHS tapes just so they continued to meet the recording requirements because it's not cheap. But even if you just got the basic one-channel Samsung video recorder, you knew it was better than tape. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of that way for product market fit around facial recognition. It's just way better and it's very reliable now. And so when I look at product market fit, I want to be able to have, a good, competent salesperson represent it and sell it. It doesn't take the founder. I want to see a few deals get lost and understand why we didn't win those deals. Um, Try to continue to improve the product. For us, we have the best product, Greg, in the world. We do Madison Square Garden, we do SoFi Stadium, we do the Sphere, we do Pechanga, we do the largest casinos in the world, Caesars. I could go on for the rest of your podcast with the great customers that we've been fortunate enough to work for. So I think that's another big thing, like, try to be really, really good at what you're focused on, but make sure it's something that has enough of a market that you might lose a few deals. And the other thing I'd say is that some of the competitors are going after the world. They want to do the Justice Department, they want to do the jails, they want to do the schools, they want
Aha.
to do the hospitals. And those are all great places that will benefit from facial recognition. Absolutely. But today, there's still, you brought it up earlier, there's still a little bit of a stigma and actually a legitimate question about, do I want to be surveilled every place I go? Do I want that building owner to know that I was here yesterday, 3 times, in fact?
Yeah.
Do I want my significant others to know that?
This podcast is sponsored by my friends at Cypress Growth Capital. At some point in your growth, you'll know you could grow faster with some outside funding, but selling a part of your company to VCs would change your whole game. And we know that's the most expensive growth capital on the planet. That's why so many practical SaaS founders I know have partnered with Cypress Growth Capital when they hit that predictable growth inflection point. For 15 years, Cypress has provided non-dilutive growth funding to bootstrap SaaS founders, including 6 successful founders I've interviewed here on this podcast. Cypress provides enough patient capital for you to invest in your growth without giving up any of your precious equity. They leverage their entrepreneurial and operational experience to provide savvy strategic guidance to help you grow efficiently and build your valuable software company faster. Go to cypressgrowthcapital.com/practical to learn more and set up a time with Cliff Centel to see if there's a fit. Now back to our program. So you kind of do this venue focused, right? And you speak casino, right?
Yep.
You can go in with those guys. You know what they're doing, what they've done before, what they care about, right? And so do your salespeople, and you're most focused on that. So you've
Right,
got
and there's a
some,
lot of technical integrations that take a lot of time that we've done over the years
yeah.
that the competitors really can't afford to do because it's not easily built into the system. Give you an example. You wanna look at you're walking in, you've scanned your ID, you get the green light. Well, wouldn't it be nice to know that person is in your Jade, level play? The guy at the front door can now greet him with a steak, or, tickets to the fight. Um, it's a big difference, between wondering what level that person is and knowing what level
Well,
they
I was
are.
in Arizona for a long time, and there was quite a few integrators and software companies that were serving casinos in the Phoenix area, tribal casinos. And I was always really surprised how sophisticated these casinos are. Of course, there's big money in it, but they were using really advanced technology for physical management and optimization, digital, marketing and relationship management and loyalty and so forth. They were quite sophisticated. Would you say that the enterprises that you're serving are pretty sophisticated business enterprises? And they're huge.
They are, and, loyalty programs really got a lot of their start around Caesars and the very first one,
Yeah.
and then you saw the airlines kinda get on board and
Yes.
now it's more of a common thing. I'll say that the casinos are very advanced in their areas, but they are behind because of the regulatory requirements. No one
Uh,
today would spin up, you know, 10 GPUs in your own, IDF closet unless somebody was making you do that.
right. Okay, so that's interesting. Let's talk about the regulation here that's happening in casinos that's unique to this, which can force technology into the business and slow the adoption of new things down and maybe prevent some adoption of, let's say, open AI, because
Yep.
it's a financial institution. What do casinos have to deal with in this kind of privacy, facial
Great
recognition
question.
world? Yeah.
Everybody wants to throw Chat GPT on everything,
Yeah.
but they're heavily regulated. So the equipment is oftentimes on-prem, particularly in they still use the term air gap. Air gap means it doesn't even speak to the rest of the network on the property,
Right.
except
And
when
or the outside world. There's no way to get
oh,
in
yeah,
or out.
there's
Yeah.
no way to
Mhm.
get to the outside world. You're not
Mhm.
doing a Google search on your workstation.
Mhm. Right.
Um, and then they're not allowing, AI to be just harvesting every bit of data that they have behind,
Yes, right.
their firewall, right? And so I think those things are gonna change because they're not able to have the level of expertise needed to be good at cybersecurity or to be good at,
Ah,
stacking up a bunch of GPUs and making sure you're optimized for that. They do
right.
lean on eConnect with facial rec, and the beauty of the facial rec is you can have a very limited LLM that resides on the prem that's built. Maybe it gets updated once a year or once a quarter, depending on what they wanna do, but it does that AI application essentially in that controlled, regulated environment, and the other thing to think about is these guys are banks, so they have all the
Financial
FinCEN
institution.
requirements.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Banks have they have to file a suspicious activity report if they're not sure, and that level is pretty low. And so in order to know these customers, KYC,
Know your
um,
customer. Yeah.
they use the facial recognition to do that.
Oh, so it's not like they're skirting privacy laws to use facial recognition. It's kind of a requirement for a financial institution, whether it's coming in digitally, to know who is there and depositing and moving money around. Like financial institutions are required to validate and prove that customer is a customer and not the bad guys.
That's exactly right.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's
Uh,
exactly
are
right.
are there sensitivities around privacy? Can people opt out of this and
People can
employees and
absolutely
yeah.
opt out, and they just go in through a different entrance.
Hmm.
They still have to provide their ID, like, you can't get paid for a jackpot without your ID, and so,
I see,
if
right,
you're
yeah.
thinking you're
We're still
going
not gonna know
in
who you
without
are, right.
providing your ID, I guess you're thinking you're not gonna win.
Yeah.
You might as well not go in.
So I'm sure, listeners are a little bit curious here. If you travel around London, go through the airport and so forth, there's cameras that can follow you around town and
Yeah.
know who you are.
Yep.
I don't know if that's the case here in the States. I guess if you go to a stadium, I mean, if I go to Madison Square Garden, is everybody identified? And if I walk around New York, am I going to be identified with cameras around town, or what's the current state?
Yeah, so those are 2 different questions. So
Yes.
Madison Square Garden, you're buying a ticket, everyone is identified.
Okay.
You come for the event, the next day, you're no longer identified. So within 24
Ah,
hours, the database of faces is purged, and you come for the next event.
so it's not a loyalty marketing, some kind of, privacy invasion. It's a validation on the event. Is this a good guy or a bad guy that we know about? And that's it.
Right. Now, what you're going to see is facilitating access to places like that because no one
Mm,
likes to stand in line. If you're paying all this money to go see a show or go see a game, you don't want to spend 30 minutes standing in line because they have to check every single ID and run you through a
right.
hand scanner to
Right.
find out
Mhm.
if you're carrying a weapon. So,
Well, it's a
all of
little bit
that,
like the airport now. You give them your driver's license, they give you a facial recognition. You don't even need to show your boarding pass anymore here in the States.
yep,
And they're doing the same thing. They know who you are and they can quickly, I mean, seconds to say,
yeah.
yes, they know your name and it's all validated
Yep,
there.
we're working
Huh.
on tech now where you could be going to the game, you got 3 people with you, you could subscribe to go in the VIP lane, provide your face, do a quick liveness check, match it with your ticket, add the 3 people that are with you,
Wow.
go in the VIP entrance.
Wow. So how big is this business opportunity for you? Maybe there's a finite number of venues and casinos that are big enough, or is that just the start of the top of the pyramid and you could work around, I mean, could this be a massive company or $100 million company serving casinos and venues?
I think we could certainly get to $100 million just in casinos and stadiums. Like, if you look at stadiums, arenas, and concert halls, there are a lot of them.
Yeah,
And they all
everywhere.
have this common issue,
Yeah.
around providing safe access quickly.
Okay.
So I think that's a big market, the, protection of all, buildings that have more than 1,000 people coming and going.
Yeah,
It's
there we go.
currently being done today, but not using, your face. And actually, one of the things during
Mm,
COVID that drove us, to be able to do clocking in and out was you used to have to put your palm on your time clock,
interesting.
right? And
Yes.
so as soon as COVID came, we realized, gee, that's not very sanitary. Let's do it without touching anything. And so now we clock in, 100,000 people a week. They don't have to touch anything.
So you're on the employee side as well. So that's part of
Yeah, yeah, the whole
yeah,
back of the
okay.
house. No, the people that come to the building most frequently are your employees. You've
Hmm.
already got them on some kind of list, so you might as well facilitate all your access control. It
Okay. Access control.
lowers your cost big time.
Yeah. Well, that's a great ROI. What does a typical casino pay you a year? And maybe you have mid-sized ones and massive ones like that are very different. But what's a typical deal size, annual contract value?
I guess I would say 85,000 a year.
Okay. And your big customers pay a lot more or something or
You know, big customers do pay more, because they have more requirements.
okay. And do you have services to
And
do
we
that
have little
integration? Yeah.
customers too. We have,
Yeah.
taverns that only have 50 slot machines that are still trying to maintain that level of control. Maybe they don't even have a surveillance team, so it could work down there, but typically we don't, take on too many that don't start at least 25,000 a year.
Um So you mentioned as you were growing just before COVID, I guess before your pivot, you took on some debt. Was that to grow faster and get some capital to invest in things you knew were working? Or you mentioned
Yes.
some venture debt.
Yeah, so the venture debt, we were at the limit of the bank line of credit,
Yeah.
and we wanted to get a little more, and so that's how we ended up meeting Costella Kirsch. And
Hmm.
by the way, anyone that's trying to find these types of, venture debt, of course, a Google search will yield a couple of good ones, but I got mine by talking to other founders.
Yeah.
So I looked at people that had raised some money, and I just reached out and had some conversations, and one of the fellows referred me into Costella Kirsch. It was great. They started with 1,500,000, which allowed us to take out the bank, have a little working capital. Right after they invested, COVID hit, less than 6 months. So we were really nervous. They were really nervous. We asked them for a little more help, and they gave us another
Well, look at
500,000.
that. As a
Before
partner, as opposed a bank, your local bank would have pulled the rug and, and gone
Absolutely.
home. But these guys were supportive. So
They sure
venture
were.
debt can mean a couple of things. It means, in Silicon Valley, it means debt that is thrown on after you raise a big VC round. I've been there, and if you just raise $30 million, you have enough to pay back a $5 million venture debt there. So it's secured by the venture investment and the
Yeah.
commitment of the venture partner, and the cash in the bank there. But it's also different than bank debt, which won't basically fund a growth initiative for a crazy company with no assets. So was it really just like a debt with an interest rate and covenants and, you know, uh, personal guarantees and all of that, but they understood your software business?
Excellent question. So yes, it was debt. It was pretty pricey compared to, this was in the 0, debt world, but we were
Yeah.
paying a premium, but
Yeah.
keep in mind, no
Well,
one
you're a venture,
no
so
one
this
was
yeah, right, yeah.
lending to us except someone like this, so we were
Yeah.
trying to get the best deal that we could, and ultimately, what I would say is not only did they we've paid them off now, we're still friends, and if we ever needed more,
That makes good
money.
friends with the lenders, when you pay them off nicely.
Right, right. I think they would lend to us again if we needed more money, and I often consult with them about questions that I'm not completely certain about, related to finance. So they
Okay.
were they were, an advisory board, if you will. They were not telling me what to do. They did ask that we provide our financial statements on a regular basis.
Yeah.
That also was a great thing for us, Greg. Prior
Okay,
to
you had
that,
some discipline.
we
How did you get your financial books ready to have this kind of conversation and gain their confidence?
it was miserable. We started out in QuickBooks,
Yep.
and, there was
Kinda cash-based, right?
yeah,
You
just
have more money.
absolutely
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
ability to bill recurring in QuickBooks. So we tried an early startup from QuickBooks. That failed us, and they failed. But we ended up at, what was called SaaS Optics, which
Hmm.
is now called Maxio.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Fantastic move for us, again, because of the venture debt. It allowed us to move out of the spreadsheets and into a real system.
And is that a SaaS metrics and financial management, or is that a payments kind of platform, or
They
what
do
is
both. We don't
Okay.
we don't take any payments that way.
Okay.
People still send us checks or do an EFT, but they have that whole capacity to do it. They integrated with QuickBooks, so we continue to build our financial statements out in QuickBooks, but managing things like how much revenue should I recognize and when,
Yeah.
they
Well, that's
do
not good
that
stuff.
and do it very, very
Maxio.
well.
Okay. And do you have a CFO? How did you get your CFO kind of finance house in order to get
We have a CFO. But this is another lesson for, entrepreneurs. I hope everybody doesn't face this challenge, but no one pays their bills on time.
Ah.
They're great customers and they do pay. We have very little bad debt.
Mhm.
But if you don't contact them, they just sit out there and drag you out. And eventually
Yeah.
they're like, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I need a PO for this. Oh, you're not licensed. Oh, this or that. So our
Yeah.
CFO spends quite a lot of time making sure, we have a substantial accounts receivable and just making sure that it's being paid, especially when these things roll over.
Did you
But
have a CFO before you raised the debt or
yes, we did. Yes, we
okay.
did. But we weren't in a, Maxio-like platform, and so after we got into Maxio, we still didn't know how to run it. I know that sounds a little bit, rudimentary because it is kind of tons of training, really, but I met the SaaS CFO, Ben Murray,
Yes.
through a webinar at Maxio,
Yeah,
and Ben has added that level of organization to our financials. When you're not we used to prepare them every month for Costello Kirsch, we paid them off. We still prepare them every month, but no one's really looking at them except us, and so we decided to get Ben involved to help us make sure that they were presentable if anyone else wanted to look at them,
yeah,
and that we were managing the metrics that are common when you talk about, how good or bad a SaaS business really is.
right. Ben has been on my podcast. I know Ben, the SaaSCFO.com, tons of great resources for financial professionals and entrepreneurs, blogs, content, courses, and everything. When you're a savvy entrepreneur or a CPA or a finance person and you just haven't done the modern SaaS recurring revenue metrics game, thousands of people have gotten educated through his materials and his coaching. So you work with Ben to get savvy about all of that. Is there a metric in your financial stack that is just kind of off the charts because you're in this wild business here? Maybe you have crazy low churn or, you know, CAC to, customer acquisition cost to long-term, lifetime value.
Those are great questions. I would say that, we do have incredibly low churn, which is amazing, but that's a testament to our team and our product.
Yeah.
We really work hard to make sure people get what they pay and they get their ROI. We have really solid growth on the identity management piece, and that's been exciting. We have a pretty high cost to acquire a customer because no one has this. And so we not only have to convince them that it's a better way to do it, but we have to take the time to really show them how to do it. And
And let them
so
come to the decision and get through it in their own way, right?
lots of free
Enterprise.
trials,
Mhm.
a trial costs us 25 to $50,000. The customer thinks, "Oh, I'm getting a free trial." They don't really understand how much it costs somebody like us to give them a free trial that includes premise-based equipment, and it's harder than delivering the actual sale product, Greg, because
This is the
they're not
first.
as committed.
Yes, right. Oh, interesting, right. So, this is an old question in enterprise sales, free pilots or paid pilots, have you experimented with those and, you
Yep,
know
yep,
okay.
we have, and, we will do a, free trial under the right circumstances, primarily for existing customers. If you have a relationship with us, you're already working with us, then it makes sense for us to work with you to evaluate what you could do next.
For a new casino in their
For an existing
yeah.
casino who
Yeah.
wants to add our identity management
Oh, I
product,
see, okay, right, so
okay?
your existing
For a
customers yeah, mhm.
Yeah, we're a little bit more rigorous with people that wanna be new customers because they just tend to be we don't know their workings, and so it makes it
Right.
harder to be successful.
And do you require, a reasonable payment for a pilot just to get their commitment and ensure that that's gonna they're gonna do the things that's required on their side?
Yeah, sometimes we do, but absolutely every time we frame what the deal would look like, we define what success would look like. We make sure that they can get the money. Like, is it coming this quarter? Is it coming in the next budget cycle? Let's get all that out there so that we're not doing a pilot, then saying, oh, by the way, it's 80,000. We're
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, we'll do the pilot, but let's make sure you know how much it's gonna cost. Let's look at every entrance. Let's figure out what you wanna do. Let's define it very clearly, and then we will undertake a pilot if we get that level of commitment. A lot of times it is cemented by some kind of a, down payment, which might get applied towards the deal. If
Yeah.
there's a one-time integration where they say, I'd like you to integrate with iTrack or with something else, and we haven't done it yet, then we'll ask for payment up front for that.
Yep.
But for the most part, we try to be considerate with the customer, and we look for that same level of consideration from them.
And as a bootstrap company, right, got uh, you got staff and expense to vest. You don't have infinite amount of it as you would if you raised a lot of venture capital. Have you ever considered raising larger venture capital? I mean, okay, so we've been around this business. We've got this casino. We could go from headed towards 10 million to 100 million. Let me go raise $10 million to grow faster and build out our products and our sales team, and we're going to go crazy. Have you know you could make an ROI argument for you, the founder, about that, but it doesn't seem like that's your style. Why is it that you haven't, considered equity funding? Maybe you were spoiled by the devil investors way back when?
It definitely made me more cautious, and I now have a team. I have a commitment to my team, and so it's not
Ah,
just about trying to get to 50 million or trying to get to
yeah,
100 million for us. Some people call it a lifestyle. Like the guys that have been with me, we're all doing pretty well. I think I made the analogy earlier. Like you would not get the level of approvals from an outside investor to pay. I don't know. I'm going to pick a particular job, but
yeah.
let's just
Pay
say
a
it's a
good salary
single
for a senior
programmer,
position. Yeah, right, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. We didn't wanna have to go through that. We weren't ready also.
Yeah.
You gotta have all the financial stuff
Oh my
ready.
gosh, yeah.
And so we've been working with, Ben to do that. But Greg, I think at the end of the day, we're just having too much fun. We're doing some incredible work. It's taken us years to get here, but most of my founder partners are younger than me, and so they've got a lot of energy, and we're gonna ride this thing for several more years, as
Right.
yeah.
And, how are those founder partners? Sounds like more than a few. You're the band of the A team that's taking, been together through thick and thin here. Are they, owners of the company or options, or what happens if this, grows, someday? And are they thinking about someday, a capital win?
I think, those early days when you put the company together, you're not always as savvy about how to handle, partners and what their level of, involvement will be and what their expectations are. And in our case, we were kind of forced into this particular structure, which is me owning 100%
Yeah,
of the business and making a promise to
yeah,
the partners that
yeah,
we will do a couple things. We will evaluate the business regularly. We will be completely transparent. We will distribute funds in a fair way as we exceed what it costs to run the business. And then we'll talk about any of those options. Ultimately, it just gives you one person to be the ultimate
yeah,
decider, if
yeah.
you will. And I think that ended up being a lucky move because of the heavy regulations. Every single jurisdiction requires the owners to get licensed. There's only one owner.
Ah,
There's only one
yeah,
background
yeah,
check.
yeah,
There's only
right.
one set of fingerprints. There's
Yeah,
only one guarantee. All of that stuff is not really thought of when you're first putting the company together and you got 5 people who could all guarantee a nice loan, but why should they? Just
right.
because they're partners.
This company's gonna grow, it's gonna be valuable. Could you see selling it someday? The price is right and the partner's right and all of that?
Sure,
Or
sure.
okay.
I think,
Yeah.
I've been through a couple of good exits. I sold to, CenturyLink in the, internet days,
Mhm.
40,000 employees at the time for that company, and, it was a good experience, good learning experience, good move for the customers, but in this case, it would have to be something similar. The
Yeah, yeah,
customers, are really important to us today,
yeah.
along with the, team. And so it's not part of our management meeting discussions. We don't have a date on the board saying,
No,
within 3 years, we want to
your
find
number.
somebody that wants to acquire the business.
Well, you keep growing and, there'll be more interest. So, several founders on the podcast have reached 20 million, 30 million, 50 million as bootstrap founders. And, it's pretty rare because you get up into that rarefied air, the valuations can be quite substantial. And at some point, it's hard to turn it down, I guess, as the money gets bigger, unless you're just committed. As Jason Fried of Basecamp, who's been on the podcast as well, just says, I want to run this. This is what I do. This is what the fun is, and it's very profitable and you enjoy it. And I have no intent to sell. So that's the practical founder superpower right there is we'll build a great sticky product for customers that's differentiated and has that product market fit in a good market and keep building the company. So congratulations on your success so far, that overnight success
Thank
over
you,
there.
Greg.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome. Is your run around Vegas or, maybe in the technology space for the gaming industry, as it's called, and you meet other software founders, what is your most typical advice for other founders who are starting software companies in Vegas or, in your market?
Well, I think one of the things I would have said just 2 years ago is make sure you have a really strong technical team and capability. But
Mm,
I see that a lot of the AI is rewriting the rate and the speed that code can be done. So people, it's
interesting.
not that you still don't need those outstanding, very very smart engineers, but their capacity to get things done has been multiplied already and will be multiplied again and again.
And are you seeing that efficiency and
Absolutely.
acceleration in your business? Okay, great. Exciting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm shocked at what our team is able to produce and how well it performs out in the field. W just blowing our horn a little bit, you can't screw up when everybody is queued up at the Garden for a playoff game.
Uh, right.
Can't do
Yeah,
it.
can't go down. Yeah, right. Interesting. Well,
So that
you and I are old enough to remember when you had to get the best engineers in town and a dozen of them or half a dozen of them to get software built in the old days in QA, and it went pretty slowly and was quite expensive, and you kinda needed more capital to get going, or you kinda really scrapped it slowly, but, this is the practical founder modern era. The cost of making software is going down, the cost of going to market is going down if you know what you're doing, have product market fit. And, the cost of funds is very expensive and risky, these days. So it's interesting that you say that. So what would your recommendation be to founders, based on that? Which is
Today, I would tell them to hold off on taking any outside money until you're really, really confident that the market is big enough that you won't get run out of the business.
right, and great. So I appreciate that. So
That's a
that's the
that's a tough
practical
thing to
founder story.
do, but, it's the old-fashioned way. A lot of businesses over the years never had access to any capital,
Yeah,
so they have to be profitable from day one.
yeah,
It's a great exercise. The other thing I would advise is make sure you know your numbers yourself. It's great to lean on Ben, the SaaS CFO. Guido Arias has been fantastic. George DeGrande here in my company, also super smart guys. But if you don't know it yourself, I think that's a big hindrance to being successful.
meaning have deep financial experience and know the numbers. You're ultimately responsible for the numbers and the cash and making
Yeah, that's
payroll and
right.
everything else.
Cash is
Okay.
what it gets down to, Greg. If the bank account doesn't have enough cash, they're only calling one person to get that resolved, and that's you. And so if you start trying to say, "Well, how did we get here? What did we spend this on? I'm not really sure why we're here now." You're going to be in total panic. You won't be able to run the business effectively, and you'll be trying to figure out how to cut costs, which is not a way to grow a sales SaaS business. You want to be able to increase your spend and increase your capacity so you can take on new customers. So managing that cash flow. The other thing I'd say, yeah, it's great to know all the accounting. That's another thing where ChatGPT will give you every rule that you could think of, rule of 40, rule of 4. You just go
Yeah.
ahead, plug all your stuff in there, and you're getting, like, deep analytics out of that. So it's not necessary for you to know that as much as it is to know, how much does it cost to keep these doors open every month? How
Right.
much am I gonna bring in? Let's see what's gonna
Right.
bill this month, you know?
Right.
Okay, that means we need to sell on top of what we've got lined up X, and that'll put us in a profit position every month. Just
There you go.
critical.
So show me, like you're a savvy sales guy, customer focused, innovative, and so forth. But you know your financials and cash deeply. So that's the definition of an entrepreneur and a practical founder right there. So
Yeah,
awesome.
it's essential.
Yeah. Thanks for being on the Practical Founders podcast, Henry. What an amazing story.
Hey, thank you, Greg. Appreciate you inviting me, and you're doing some great work. I enjoyed listening to a couple other of the podcasts, and I'm gonna continue to do that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, the fun is I get to pull out the stories and help share them. I'm not creating the companies. I know how hard it is. I've been doing that for a long time, and I don't have to do that anymore. So this is fun for me.
It's fantastic because I told you this when we were prepping, but I got some incredible insight just in the first podcast I
Yeah,
listened
there we
to.
go.
So you're
That's right.
doing great work.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing your insights here. We'll keep the podcast going. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Henry.
Greg.
Thanks for watching this week's interview on the Practical Founders podcast. Be sure to like this episode and subscribe to the Practical Founders YouTube channel to keep up with my weekly in-depth interviews with serious software founders who are building valuable software companies without big funding. You can check out my blog, all the podcast episodes, and information about my Practical Founders CEO peer groups at practicalfounders.com, or message me on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect. See you next week.